Now, the other part of this particular module is something we refer to as personality disorders. And personality disorders, like I mentioned when we were talking about the DSM-4, are what we used to call them as characterological, and that really kind of betrays the difficulty of treatment with these, is that they really are woven in, if you will, into the person's character. And so essentially, if we were to define it, they are characterized by inflexible and enduring behavior patterns that impair functioning. Behavior patterns that impair social functioning. And they, personality disorders are such that the person isn't really even all that aware, so the distress factor isn't part of this, but the disruption to their social life and their social relationships are really quite significant. So a lot of times the way we think about personality disorders is in terms of what we refer to as clusters. And there is one cluster that is anxiety-based or expresses more anxious types of behavior. One would be avoidant, would be an example. Another one would be compulsive personality disorder. And again, these sound similar, like compulsive does, but they don't experience the distress that an OCD person might. Another cluster is more eccentric types of behaviors. Eccentric. In this category would be schizotypal, which some people would suggest is the precursor to schizophrenia. Another one would be schizoid. And these are really quite eccentric people. They stay to themselves. They don't gain a lot of attention at all. The third is dramatic or impulsive types of behavior patterns. What falls into this category would be histrionic. Narcissistic would be another one. And then the last one really is a lack of conscience, if you will. And, well, I take that back. We'll stick with these. Two of the more dramatic of these, the most troubling of these two, of this particular category. So there's three clusters that we look at. But underneath this one is one called borderline personality disorder, which is quite disruptive. Usually you see frequent suicide attempts. You see suicide. You see self-mutilation or cutting. Folks that are listening to this that might have a history of cutting, it doesn't make you borderline, it's just one of the characteristics. Usually very poor relationships. Usually they have a string of relationships that they leave in their wake a lot of times. They have a very black and white way of looking at the world, which makes it very difficult to relate to people. The other one is antisocial personality disorder, and that's why I have the PET scan up above. Antisocial personality disorder usually exhibits a lack of conscience for wrongdoing, even toward friends and family. So they lack of conscience. Oftentimes, many of the people that are on death row would fall into this category. What you see when you're looking at this particular what I want to say, PET scan, is that even when you look at it, take note of what's different, because what you'll see is all of this area, the red areas up here, are lit up, in a sense, and that's the frontal lobe. That's where all the decision making and things like that occur. When you come over here and look at this, look at the difference. This is about the same. This section back here, the occipital lobe, and up in the temporal lobe, it depends kind of on the activity, what's being given this person. But notice how blue all this is up in this area compared to this. And this frontal lobe has everything to do with impulsivity, with impulse control, with conscience, with decision making. This frontal lobe area is way under active, which would suggest some of the possibilities of why we see the lack of emotional and behavioral regulation in people identified with antisocial personality disorder. And like I said, this tends to be a lifelong issue with anybody in these categories. Some are certainly more functional than others, and that's worth taking note of. So, all right, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of personality disorders. There's a lot more to know, but that gives you an overview of what that looks like. And we'll go to the last section as we talk about eating disorders in the next video.